So we are now live. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Today we have the awesome Mr. Steve Dargan on the call. Steve is actually a few weeks ago now, finished working with us in the 1%. He's come through our program, the 1% Blueprint. He's kind of taken 20 minutes out of his day to talk through his experiences. For anyone watching, I think you get a lot out of this conversation. My account, Steve's a legend, but I'll let him speak for himself. Steve, do you want to introduce yourself, who you are, what do you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Luke. No pressure with the legend piece. So I'm Steve Dargan. I'm a headhunter. I work for one of the top search firms globally. I run their global digital infrastructure practice as well as their European technology practice. So happy Wednesday, everyone.
Good. Busy man as well, right?
Just a touch, yeah.
Just a tad. So let's rewind, Steve, a few months back. And I think you might have seen a couple of my bits on LinkedIn. I probably connected with you as well. Maybe seen some other people posting about the experience of us working together. You got in touch and we decided to have a conversation. What was going on then, and what was your motivation for having a chat?
It's interesting because I've sort of replayed this conversation with a few friends, and I think the reality was the time of your posts, the connection requests, all that wonderful stuff was at a point where I was a little bit lost, if I'm being honest. I'd spent sort of the last 3 or 4 years working at 100 miles an hour, stupid hours, neglecting the family, which was starting to hurt. I'm just feeling a bit crap, actually. And I wasn't quite sure how to sort of redress that balance while still trying to perform at a really good level for the business, which I'm massively passionate about and feel privileged in the role that I've got, etc. So didn't want to lose that, but thought there's got to be a better, smarter way of working. And I think when you and I first spoke, it was, let's try and avoid having a heart attack by the time I'm 55.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's not to your situation, Steve. Sadly, it's like a very common narrative for a lot of guys, and it's that achieving great success in your career, and that's fantastic, and that's all going well. But then often that's at the detriment to mental and physical well-being. But then also those core important parts of your life, which are your relationships and your family. And for me, 99% of the time, none of that ever comes from a malintentioned or bad place. It's because you want to be successful and thrive and provide, but then you end up becoming a martyr to that success and then actually compromising the important stuff to do that, and it becomes this sort of negative feedback loop where you can't. It's hard to find like what's the path out of it. I know there's more here, but I can't quite see the wood for the trees. Is that kind of a fair summary?
That's the summary of the wood for the trees is perfect because it just. That's it. There's no clarity. It's almost, it's like a mist, and it's trying to work your way through it, whilst also trying to be uber successful and maximize your earnings, all that wonderful sort of stuff. It's it just wasn't a very nice place. It's something I haven't encountered before. I've always had pretty crystal clear thoughts in terms of what I wanted to do and where I was going, but the timing, it was just something wasn't right. And it was trying to, dig into that and unpick that and work out what it was. And I didn't have the answer. And then you and I had a conversation. It just seemed the logical thing to do.
Nice.
And and coming out the other side of it, absolutely the right thing to do.
Well, that's kind of a nice segue onto where we are today. I mean, just something you're saying there, though. I think it's almost feeling like you've got an itch you can't scratch. It's like there's just something not quite right, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Like on paper, everything sort of feels like it's where it should be, but it's just what should be coming out of this is something that isn't, right? So that segues nicely onto where we are today. Like, what are your key successes, achievements? Given that's where you were, where are we at today, and what's your achievements? And then I think if we take that and then we can dig into some of the things that have helped you get to where we are today.
Yeah. Look, I think if you look at the blueprint and you look at the process, what you go through, and you break it down into sort of the 3 core areas around sort of nutrition, exercise, and then that whole mindset accountability piece. The nutrition and the mindset piece were quite binary for me. It was easy. That wasn't tough. I'm used to doing exercise. I really enjoy it. It's a good release. The nutrition piece wasn't overly difficult. It was the mindset, accountability piece that was really tough. You know, and you and I have had these conversations a number of times. I don't like using that sort of word fluffy, but it's the fluffy grey stuff that was really, really tough for me. But it's had a massive impact on how I feel right now, and the sort of principles I can apply moving forward. And there's things in there that I will absolutely do forever. So yeah, that was. I've got through it, and I've learned a lot from it, and I'm still using a lot of those techniques now, which has surprised me.
And I think one of the, like we said there, like some guys, when I speak to them, one of their burning bridges is they're physically overweight and they're physically not where they want to be. That wasn't a big, really burning bridge for you at all. That wasn't one of your motivations. And from like an exercise perspective, that's something that was kind of built into your life already. You know, you've done martial arts for a long, long time, and that was it. But it was like, well, actually, so I'm ticking some of those boxes, but things still aren't working. So what it is, and that's that looking a bit deeper and doing the more woolly, you know, but the mindset, ownership, accountability stuff. But ultimately, we talk about being the 1% top, you know, your best, and like I think sometimes that can feel a bit alpha. And it's like grinding and just, you know, smashing weights around and stuff. It's like no. Actually, having a pair of bollocks is looking a bit inward and challenging yourself and looking at parts that you maybe don't quite like that. But actually, that's what unlocks you and sets you free in certain ways. And of course, there's methods that we do that, but that's not easy. but also that's where the growth comes, I think.
Massive amount of growth, and you know, the comments I've had about how my perception, outlook, approach, engagement has shifted in the last, you know, couple of months is great. And, you know, the most important bit is the feedback from the family, because that was, you know, that was super important, you know, much more present, much more engaged. And there's obviously some of the techniques that we've used through that sort of blueprint that have really made a difference. And that's stuff that will stay permanently.
And I think so one of the key things for you was balance, right? It was the balance wasn't where you wanted it to be. But I think it's almost like a cliched phrase, like work-life balance. And I think I've chatted about this before, all the clients I've spoken to think, well, maybe there's going to be some little hack that you have for life and then a hack for work, and it'll all fit together. And for me, that's the wrong way of looking at it. It's actually look at yourself, what you need to do, and that's the holistic piece of, physical activity, because that's a core part, and yet what you're putting in your mouth, but also how you're framing the situations, your mindset, your headspace, and how you're looking at how you behave and react. And then if you're taking responsibility and ownership of yourself, both mentally, emotionally, physically, well, then the balance comes as an emergent property, because you're there able to then create the balance that you need. It's not like it's a thing that you have. It's no, that's something that you're able to create because you're taking care and ownership of yourself. Does that make sense?
It does. And you know, that when you start to think about work-life balance, you start to think of a start and a finish point with work, and then the rest of your life doesn't work like that, right? And you know, certainly the business that I'm in, it's not a 9-to-5 job, and you just can't, you know, have specific hours. What for me was interesting was going into this, you know, got to commit. If you're going to do this, absolutely lay yourself bare, which is really tough when you're 50 years old like me and you've been stuck in your ways for such a long time. To actually lay yourself completely bare and open, it was uncomfortable at times. But you know, even, you know, little things like the, you know, I don't want to give away too many secrets here, but obviously the 5 a.m. start and straight into exercise, that's been a game changer, because your mind is then clear, it's ready, it's active, it's ready to go. You know, you're not jumping out of bed straight into the shower, straight to work, which would have been what I would normally would have done. That even that morning routine has massively changed my life. So it's just like you say, it's the little. There's never going to be one sort of huge change that's going to make a massive difference. It's going to be little incremental changes in various different parts that are going to make the difference. And that's just one example. But also, you know, some of the mindset ownership things that we did, you know, the journaling piece, for example. You'd have asked me 4
But you
months
were like,
ago,
well,
really? Come on. But I've taken to it now, and I've consistently done it for a couple of months, and it's something that I'll stick with now forever, because it gives me a sort of close at the end of a day, and it's sort of you know, it's a cut off. I sleep so much better because of it, and therefore the next day I'm at it again, and I know what I need to do because I've got that closure. It's little; those are the little hacks that make a massive difference.
And it's not like one of those things in isolation done once. It's this thing just spread across the whole piece, and that's why the whole thing is kind of multifaceted. Like exercise and activity, physical activity. You know, this meat box here, like that's part of you in your head, and it's not to say that the cerebral stuff isn't all important on its own, because it is, but they're all as important as each other. And I think sometimes when it comes to exercise and diet, maybe, you know, if you're coming into a process like this and you're very much like, well, I need to sort my head out. What's that got to do with anything? Well, actually, that's the integral part as well, because how you look, how you feel, how you operate, like consistency and ritualized action around exercise is incredibly important for your own well-being, how you do things. Now, is it just that? No. And I think what we said before, you had that box partially ticked, but it wasn't serving you right because the other areas weren't being addressed or looked at in the right way. And it's making sure that all fits together harmoniously. And I know things like with the journaling, like I won't talk about specifics, but you definitely had times where you'd had things happen that were stressful, and historically you might have reacted, and actually you use those methods to be able to stop and think and process and go, well, actually I'll be able to deal with that in a different way. And not only that, maybe actually get a positive outcome from what was a situation, whereas historically they'd just been like and react. And that's all about that, being able to take a step back and be mindful. And that's about being the 1%. It's not about bowling around, waving your knob around. It's being able to stop and be, you know, sort of calm and considered, I think, you
know. Which historically has been difficult. I always, you know, I find it difficult not to say what I'm thinking, which isn't always productive, right? But that just some of the little tricks and traits and exercises and the journaling is a great example of that. Just going away, thinking about it, writing it down, getting it out of your head onto paper, thinking about it, and then going back with a response has made a massive difference. And a huge, you know, what, to your point, what could have been me probably going to have to find a new job has actually worked out in a really positive way for me and for the business. So we've benefited from that. And even you know, I think we had this conversation about similarly at home, just rather than that immediate reaction, just take yourself out of the situation, think about it, and then react. Again, that's made a massive difference.
Yeah, I think and that way of thinking sort of plays out all over the place, because we're so often quick to just base reactive whatever the situation is, and that might be doing some behaviors that we don't want to do ourselves just for ourselves, or it might be something at work, or it might be something at home, or whatever else. But just having a little bit of time to just stop and think and take stock, that's really, really powerful. And it's not always easy. Life isn't always easy, but the more we can breed that mentality and that mindset, for me, it's just really powerful, because it kind of unlocks pretty much everything, because you're not simply at the whim of your own emotions and thoughts, and you can put a level in which allows you to control stuff. What would you say, Steve, if you think about that? You know, we know where we are today, and you've gone through quite the journey to work through this stuff, and it's probably, like we just said, it's probably not one thing, but what would you say has been your key takeaway from the whole process, if there is one, or maybe there's a couple?
I think there's a couple. I think first and foremost, if you're going to do it, you've got to go all in. You know, really lay yourself bare, which, as I said, is a really difficult thing to do in itself. But I think the rewards that come as a consequence of that are massive. You know, if you want to make some changes, then you've just got to, for me, if you're going to do this, go all in is one thing. And I just think that whole structure and routine, not just around nutrition and exercise, but also the mindset piece, that bit is huge. It's huge. And I think, you know, you and I have had this conversation as well. We've only just sort of lifted the lid on that. I think there's more work potentially to do. It's not a finished article by any stretch of the imagination. But for me, if I look at where I started and where I am now, I think ultimately, I want to be the best version of me that I possibly can be. And the version I've got now is distinctly better than the version that was, beginning of August or wherever we started this journey. So those for me are the key takeaways. But if you're going to do it, throw yourself in completely.
Yeah, and that's what you were great at. Like, and I bang on about this all the time, but the Stoic way of thinking, the obstacle is the way. You learn through challenge and adversity, and actually that's how you grow. But that's the truth. And the bits that you go, oh, I'm not sure about that. For me, that's 100% headlong reason. You need to go head first into it, because if there's a bit of a discomfort, that's just for me, that's life telling you, no, that bit there, that needs looking at and addressing. And because what you find is you go headlong first into it, and then out the other side, you're like, oh, that was good. And it's almost like you feel like, there's a fog that was there. We didn't know it was there, but then it goes, oh, bloody hell, this is good, this. And then that's what it speaks to about there's levels to it, because I'm not in I'm constantly striving to burn myself out, but like when you realize there's things inside that you didn't understand about yourself and you unlock them, you go, well, this is great, but there's clearly more there. But that's actually a real positive thing, and you start to get excited about, well, yeah, maybe there's some more shit I need to work through and work out mentally or whatever else. But actually, that's not scary. It's really exciting because you feel better for the process, right?
Completely. And that whole clarity piece, that sort of laser focused bit has not just come from one element, it's come from all three. And it's interesting running headlong into things that you don't particularly want to do or you're not comfortable with. Sometimes they're not as bad as you were expecting, or they're not as difficult as you were expecting. But then there are other things that are. I mean, there was one particular thing that you suggested that I've done once, never do it again.
I know what that is as well. I know what it
is. But in the whole, I mean, one of the other biggest takeaways for me, and replaying this back even now in my own head is a bit like, really, is that the meditation piece. That is huge for me. I was, completely just, really, is another load of nonsense. But I genuinely enjoy it. I really look forward to doing it every day. Don't miss it. It's the one thing that's absolutely got to be in there. And it's made a huge difference from something that realistically 3 or 4 months ago, been like, no, I'm not a hippie. I'm not up for that. But no, it's been amazing.
No, and that the meditation thing, that just speaks to what we were talking about earlier around being able to stop and just think, and it's a practice that allows you to not react and realize that, and also it's a nice little, however long you do it for, it doesn't have to be a long time, but it's a little bit of time for you just to stop and be at peace. Awesome. Well, look, Steve, I know you're busy, so I don't want to cannibalize any more of your time. It's been great chatting. Hopefully, from the guys who've been watching, you got a lot out of it. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and like we said, I think us working together, that's good. Well, not right now, but then there's more exciting work to be done, and that's the whole point about personal growth and development. If anyone's watching this and they were thinking, yeah, that sounds great, but maybe on the fence, never had a coach, maybe a bit like you, a bit like, what's this sort of personal development all about? It's a bit funny. What would you say to someone who's clearly maybe know that they need something, but they're not sure about starting the process?
This has changed my life massively. But what I would say is, if you are not going into it 100%, don't do it. But if you know there's something that's not quite right, do this, embrace it in its entirety, throw yourself absolutely into it, and I guarantee you, after that 12-week program, you'll have a very different perspective on things, and you'll feel, I'll use your phrase here, you'll start feeling like Batman.
Nice. Well, on that note, Steve, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure chatting. Thank you for your time. If anyone's watching and they like the sound of what we've been talking about, they want like a chat, drop a note in the comments or drop me a DM. We can have a conversation. On that note, Steve, have an awesome day. Everyone else, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you very much. Take care.
Cheers, buddy. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.